Okay, thank you for your talk. So there's actually only one precept, and that precept is not for me, for all beings. So when we hold precepts tightly, oh my God, I broke a precept. I'm a terrible person. I did this horrible thing. I broke a precept. That's about me. That's about other people approving of me and me approving of me. And that's not the direction of the precepts. The direction of the precepts is help all beings. That's the direction of the precepts. So Tom told the story of, the monk who carries the woman across the river, and the companion, the junior monk, hours later explodes and says, "Oh, this is so horrible, you touched this woman, oh no." But that senior monk actually didn't break any precepts. He fulfilled all of the precepts because he helped somebody. Can someone turn the light on, please? Thank you. So it's a very important to understand this direction. This is a direction of our practice. Our practice is not about us. It's not about our comfort. It's not about our virtue. It's about helping this world. That's what my teacher always said. Zen means wake up and help this world. Attain your true self and help this world. That's the point of practice. And, Tom talked about the three poisons: desire, anger, and ignorance. And he didn't talk about ignorance because it doesn't explicitly come into the story. But ignorance means not like you don't know some fact about the, GDP of Mongolia or something like that. Ignorance means ignorance of our true nature. And ignorance of our true nature usually means that we think that we're distinct from the rest of the universe. Maybe we think we're wonderful, maybe we think we're horrible, but we think we're some kind of separate being. That we think of ourselves as being separate. And this separateness blinds us to our true nature. So thank you very much for your talk. Mm-hmm. Are there any questions? Yes.
For new people?
Yeah. Oh, good question. For new people, what is a precept? Right, yeah. So you don't convert to Buddhism. You can be a Buddhist and a Jesuit priest. In fact, they've been Jesuit priests, Zen masters. You can be a Buddhist and a rabbi. You can be a Buddhist and a Episcopalian minister. You can be a Buddhist and anything else. So it's not like you convert to Buddhism, which is the one true way. So in Asia, religions, until Europeans started messing around, religions were seen as very compatible. There were practices. So there isn't this notion of conversion. But what there is a notion of responsibility. And so precepts are promises that you make. The 5 precepts are not to kill, not to lie, not to steal or take things that are not given, not to do bad actions out of lust, and not to take intoxicants to induce heedlessness. So those are the 5 first precepts. And we're going to have a few precept ceremony in April, actually, if you want to see precepts. And what these 5 precepts really represent is that someone has been practicing for a while and they're saying, I take this seriously. I really take this seriously. And I want this, my life is shaped around this practice. This practice is serious for me. And I really want to take it seriously. And so I'm going in this direction of basic morality, not lying, not stealing, not killing, not hurting people through sex, not getting intoxicated and heedless and therefore unable to function. So this is a basic direction. And then 10 precepts basically means that you want to help lead the group. You want to help lead practice. You want to maybe give little talks. You want to put your energies not just into your own practice, but open up more for like helping the group practice, taking on responsibilities. And then after that, we have 16 precepts, and then we have 48 precepts, which gives you, you get the full count of, you know, the 5, and then you add 5 more to get 10, you add 6 more to get 16, then you add 48, and then that gives you the full count of 64 lay precepts, which is the maximum that lay people can take. And as Tom said, different schools of Buddhism have different numbers of precepts for monks, but they run into the hundreds. They always run into the hundreds for monks and nuns. But the direction of the precepts is always the same. So doing a precept ceremony, it's like when you get married, you know, you can live with somebody for 20 years, but one day you look at each other and say, let's make this really public, let's commit to each other, let's get married, you know? So taking precepts is like that. It's like a public commitment to practice, a public commitment to the Sangha. So, and if anyone's interested in taking precepts, talk to me, because as I said, we're having a ceremony in April. So thank you very much for your question. Yeah, because it does seem weird, like if you walk into a Buddhist center for the first time and you hear this word precepts, like, what is that? So thank you so much for your question. Yeah. Are there any other questions? Yes.
About Theravada and Mahayana.
But Theravada and Mahayana, you want to know about them?
Yeah. So the little I know about, I thought that Theravada is the older one. So is it like an Old Testament?
Okay, so let's talk about Theravada and Mahayana. So Theravada, which Mahayana people used to call Hinayana. Hinayana means lesser way, and Mahayana means greater way, so that's not nice. So Theravada means the way of the elders, and Mahayana means great way. Theravada claims that it's the oldest form of Buddhism and that Mahayana grew out of it. Mahayana claims that the first teaching that the Buddha actually gave was the Avatamsaka Sutra, which is a very high, complex, high Mahayana, sort of like high church, you know, very complex, very high Mahayana. Yeah, it's a statement of aesthetics, not a statement of virtue. So very high Mahayana teaching to his mother in the Dashita heaven, before he even talked about the Four Noble Truths or anything. So you have these conflicting stories. There's a lot of evidence that all these things kind of grew up together. And also, you know, like, you know, people in India will say that, you know, Hindus in India will say that Buddhism grew out of Hinduism, but in fact, in the time of the Buddha, you didn't have Hinduism in the way that it appeared later. So all these things, you know, Hindu practice, Theravada practice, Mahayana practice, they all interfed each other. They were all growing up together, really. And the practices, you know, within Buddhism, you have the Theravada, which is Southeast Asia, not really Vietnam. Vietnam is more Mahayana, but Laos, Cambodia, Thailand, those places, Myanmar. So that's Theravada. And then you have Northeast Asia, which is Mahayana. And Vietnam was very influenced by China, that's why it's Mahayana. Mm-hmm. And then you have Mongolia and Tibet, which is the Vajrayana, although they like to call themselves the Mahayana. So, you know, everybody has their story, but they're all pointing to the same thing. People are so tired. I always make this gesture. This person's pointing south, this person's pointing north. They're actually pointing at the same thing. So they're all pointing at the same thing, but very different ways of expressing it, and very different, you know, the surface teachings can be extremely different. And you can get into tremendous doctrinal arguments about this. And in early Buddhism, oh my God, like the Heart Sutra is basically, besides being totally wonderful, it's also negating the Shravastavadins. Okay, so, you have all these schools, you have the Yogacara and you have the Majjhimaka, but they're all, they're all this. And Zen takes from a lot. Zen takes from a lot of the different strains of Mahayana. But yeah, and they feel different to practice, even within Zen. I overheard you talk about Soto. We're actually cousins of Rinzai Zen, not Soto Zen. We're very different from Soto Zen. Soto Zen and Rinzai Zen, and then we're Korean style, but we're a Linshi school. Rinzai is a Japanese Linshi. So, the Linshi schools have a certain flavor. The Saodong, Soto schools have a certain flavor. They have a certain flavor. So I don't know what your favorite flavor of ice cream is. It's like that. It's like you walk in and, oh, wow, it fits, or not quite fit, And so that's more, it's a difference in flavor and what people naturally are comfortable doing. And so, yeah, I could get into the doctrinal differences, but why should I? Here you are in actually American version of Korean Sun, which is the pronunciation of Chan, which is the Chinese, and which falls within the Mahayana. And here we are practicing together. So thank you for your question. Yeah. Yeah, the compass of Zen classes that we have go into some of these distinctions. So we have one coming up Saturday. Are there any other questions?
I have a question.
Sure. And then Kelly after that. Okay.
Okay, so the story is a nice story. But I'm wondering, because Buddhism started being written down, because it's a patriarchal system, then the stories don't change, and then they don't reflect the changes. I mean, as far as we know, maybe the woman's could have made it across. She was just trying to find the perfect path. And a monk came and said, "Can I help you across?" And she was like, "Oh, not again. Might as well just give in, let him carry me over." Even though I don't need it. Fine. And so the stories always have that. And I get that if you were a male monastic, that story has a lot of meaning, because you're struggling with, possibly, although not always, your attraction towards the female.
I was going to say, it's a very heterosexist story.
Yeah. And so, what we lose by not changing some of the stories, tweaking them to be more, genderless. It could have been an old man who needed help. Of course, then that takes away some of the precept of, now you didn't touch a woman, but I don't know. It just seems that we get stuck in that.
We could have nuns
change the stories.
We have a nun helping a man across the river.
Yeah, but is there that story? That's just it. Is that in the?
I mean, you could. Okay, so let me tell you a story about nuns. There's a very famous temple. Okay, we've got two people waiting now. Kelly and Jennifer both. You're going to get a chance. There's this very wonderful temple in Korea, which I don't know if the people who went on the Korea trip this time visited the nuns temple, where they do this. Is it a 1-year kyelche or a 3-year kyelche or something like that? They do this very, very long retreat. The monks just do like 90 days on, 90 days off. But these women, they have this incredibly serious practice, incredibly serious. And so, after, first the Japanese were colonialists and did a lot of destruction, and then you had the Korean War, a lot of destruction. And this nuns temple was destroyed, and these women by themselves rebuilt it by themselves. They didn't hire anybody. They didn't have any guys. They just rebuilt this temple. These women are really formidable. They could carry anyone across the stream, you know, right? But they would have the same problem if it was a guy, because you take these precepts. Yeah, I mean, this is coming from, you know, it's not just the male-female stuff. It's not just the patriarchy. It's not, you know, it's tremendously, it assumes there's just two genders and that everyone fits into one or the other. I mean, there's tremendous stories, tremendous problems with all of this. So we have to be aware of that. Like a lot of Zen teachers now, and not just in our school, don't say patriarch, we say ancestor, which is actually a better translation of the Chinese, because the Chinese is often genderless. So ancestor is better than patriarch. But you know, you read like books that have already been published, and they've already been published. They're not going to be published again, the way the book market works, and it says patriarch. So we have to deal with that as honestly and openly, and not try to make excuses for it. We have to see it for what it is, but also understand the underlying teaching and value there. That's our only choice, because we're not going to burn all the sutras. Well, we could, but I don't think it would help, because then we lose a lot of stuff that is really helpful. So yeah, so this gives me a chance to talk about the time I got very angry with my teacher over this. So my teacher was Zen Master Song-san, and I don't know how many of you have ever been in a teaching position, but you know, whether you're teaching like 5-year-olds or whatever, you get into this thing where there's certain stories that you tell over and over, and then these stories shift over time. So at some point you're telling these 5 stories, and you know, 10 years later you're telling these 5 stories, but in between, you know, so there's this, at any moment there's storehouse of stories. And one of his storehouse of stories was this woman who gets a flat tire, and she's wearing beautiful clothes and high heels, and she can't fix her flat tire, and she's so helpless. And you know, this guy comes and rescues her, you know, sort of like the monks, right? And oh man, I hated this story. And one time I just couldn't take it anymore. You know, I was in a retreat in Colorado, and he was there, and he tells us a story, and he asks for questions. I shoot up my hand. I say, why do you tell this horrible sexist story? This is a horrible sexist story. You shouldn't tell this story. And he makes some kind of lame excuse, the way guys usually do in situations like that, and keeps chattering on. And I am like this young monk, you know, after the talk, we sit, and I'm sitting there, it's such a sexist pig, it's a horrible story. Why does he tell this story? It's such a horrible story. I'm going on and on in my mind. I have to tell him it's a horrible story. And my mind is going like this, you know? So as soon as the stick is hit for walking meditation, you know, you're supposed to take your place in line, and you walk with everyone else. And then if you need to leave the room, when you come to the door, you leave the room. As soon as the stick is hit, I'm out of there. You know, I'm just out of there, and I'm going to go find him. You know, we're in this house, right? Somebody's house. And I'm looking and looking, and I finally find him. He's, you know, teaching someone calligraphy. He's a wonderful calligrapher, and he's teaching someone calligraphy. And I am so pissed off. You know, I just throw open the door. He says, why do you tell this story about this woman? You always tell this story about this woman. And he stands up, and he points at me. He says, I never made woman. Thank you. And he never mentioned it again. Yeah, that's Bodhisattva anger. He wasn't really angry. He was just going to teach me a lesson. And because my mind, I didn't have to do that. I'd wasted a whole period of meditation when I could have been waking up, and instead I was going, you know, like that, right? You don't have to do that. Just when the time comes, you say, hey, you sexist pig, you know, like that. Yeah, so that's my experience with it. Yeah, and yeah, it's an interesting thing. I mean, there's all kinds of similar things, like with racism, you know, anti-Semitism, anti-Muslim. There's all kinds of stuff in this world that many of us are learning to grow out of. And yet its traces are there in things that are otherwise very valuable. And so learning how to deal with that is really interesting. So thank you, Liz, for your question. And next up is Kelly.
I'm still feasting on Liz's question and your answer, and I'm aware that we're coming up on time, and I don't think my question is going anywhere anytime soon. So I'd like to pass it on to Jennifer, if that's okay.
Okay, all right.
So, anytime there's a discussion of precepts and all the different numbers of them, when they talk about not lay people, which is what we are, but monks versus nuns, it always gets me as a woman that the men have like 200 precepts and the women have like 300. And it's in all three traditions, Theravada, Mahayana, and also Vajrayana. But then again, like, I have to just let it down.
Well, I have to actually,
Stop carrying it.
in Vajrayana, technically, there are no nuns. The nuns are not allowed to take the Vinaya precepts because here's how it works. And until very recently, there were no Theravada nuns for hundreds of years. So originally, there were nuns in all these different schools. And then what happened is, because, you know, nuns are not supported the way monks are, which means that, like in Korea, nuns get more respect in a certain sense, because you can become a monk and, you know, you have certain stature and prestige in the society, but the nuns don't. And so nuns have to be really serious about their practice. You don't become a nun because you want to lead a comfortable life. Whereas if you go high enough in the monk hierarchy, you can have a fairly comfortable life. And so there's a lot of respect for nuns. But outside the Mahayana, because there isn't the outside support, and especially, you know, when you have to go begging for your food and you're not allowed to handle money, then all your support has to come from lay people. And so the women's orders did not get that kind of support, and outside of the Mahayana, they died out. And in order for a woman to take Vinaya precepts, she has to do it in front of a committee that consists of a certain number of male monks and a certain number of female monks, i.e. nuns. And there were no more nuns. And so you couldn't have nuns anymore. And what happened in the Theravada is some women went and took Mahayana precepts, and they just said, we're going to do this. And so you have Theravada nuns now who, not everyone in Theravada recognizes them, but they're quite remarkable people. There's one who's very famous. She was I think, some kind of like reporter or some kind of intellectual, and then she gave it all up to take vows and become a nun. And she spearheaded this whole thing. And in, I think in Thailand, these are remarkable women. They're really remarkable. And you know, I saw a video about women in Vajrayana who were finally allowed to become, what is it, I want to say geshe, is that it? That academic, that they were allowed to have a certain kind of status, a certain kind of education. That's another thing. A lot of these traditions, including in the Mahayana, nuns were not given the same opportunities for practice and education that the monks were given. But anyway, so these a small group of women were allowed by the Dalai Lama to do this kind of training, but they're not Vinaya nuns. They have not taken the full, they're called Vinaya, the full Vinaya precepts. And the Dalai Lama is seen in this movie, which, if I remember the title, I'd tell you it's really a great movie. Again, because you see these powerful women. And he says, well, you know, I just can't do this because you can only become a nun if you have nuns to take precepts from, and there are no nuns to take precepts from. So I can do this, but, you know, so hello, it's 2024, and this is still going on. But the thing about these women, it's like, they don't give a shit. They're going to practice, and they're going to learn, and they're going to do this stuff, and nobody's going to stop them, whether it's recognized or not. That's the thing that I really get from it. Like, don't let the bastards get you down, you know? If you're going to do it, you just do it. You find a way to do it. And it's easy for me to say, I'm a real comfortable middle class, et cetera, person in a comfortable society with no bombs around me or anything. But the fact is that there are people in this world who will just do it. They will just do it, and nothing's going to stop them, nothing. And that's really remarkable. So who cares if the guys have all the prestige? Who cares? We're all going to die, and in 50 years, nobody's going to remember any of us after we die. Or if they do, they'll remember, like Shakespeare. Nobody knows who Shakespeare was. We don't know what he was like. We don't know, what it'd be like to have a beer with him or a cup of coffee or whatever. Smoke a cigarette. They were really big on tobacco because they just discovered tobacco in Europe, from America, and they all love to smoke. There's songs about tobacco and Elizabethan. We don't know what Shakespeare was like. We just have his plays, So, 50 years after we're gone, nobody's going to know who we were. It's just how it is. You might hear stories about somebody. So right now, how do we live our life right now? That's what's important. How we live our life right now, and that goes into this great stream that encompasses all of us. That's the point. So yeah, these women are amazing. They're really amazing. Anytime you can see a movie about Buddhist nuns or Buddhist, not really nuns, but they're better than the monks, go see it. Yeah, thank you. So I guess that's it for questions. Kelly, you can send me an email. Okay. Thank you, everybody. Let's